Hi everybody, Bob Guiney here on Success Today, and joining me is Davelle Morrison. Davelle, thank you so much for joining me.
No problem. Thanks, Bob, for having me.
Oh, of course. Now, we've been talking during the break, and I'm fascinated with this. Obviously, you have a huge history in real estate and tons of success. What are the differences primarily that you see between the marketplace in Toronto and the United States?
Wow.
There's a bunch, right?
There's a ton of differences.
Yeah.
So for one thing is that Americans can actually write off their mortgage interest against their principal residence.
Right.
You can't do that in Canada.
You're kidding.
So I find that in the US, people buy the biggest possible house they can
Right.
just because they're going to write off a portion of their mortgage interest.
Sure.
And in Toronto, you can't do that.
Oh my gosh, that's fascinating to me.
Yeah, the other big difference I find with mortgages, for example, is in Toronto, people have a mortgage for 3, 4, 5 years, and then they have to keep requalifying for that mortgage,
Right.
even though it's amortized over 25 years. In the US, you have a 25-year mortgage.
Yeah, you qualify once.
Yeah, you qualify once.
Yeah.
So that's why I could see things like the big crash happening because no one's ever had to requalify for the mortgages.
Boy, that's a real good point. I
Yeah.
never even thought about that.
Whereas in Canada, people have to requalify every 3, 4, 5 years.
Yeah.
So I think it makes them a lot more solid.
Sure.
Yeah.
No, it makes a lot of sense to me. Now, obviously, you've had a huge history, experience in the real estate industry. What do you think defines you and separates you from the pack of realtors out there?
For me, it's really about education. I really believe in educating my clients. So I hold seminars. I have a house hunting boot camp and I have a real estate investing boot camp. And it's all about getting people out and educating them.
Yeah.
So I bring out a mortgage broker, a real estate lawyer, I bring out an accountant, a paralegal, everybody who really affects the process for a first-time home buyer and for real estate investors. And it's really so that people can learn everything they need to know, and then they will feel comfortable working with me.
Right.
Because they know that I'm all about educating them and making sure they make a really good decision.
And it's good to be transparent like that, because I would think some people think if they hold all the keys to that process, that makes
Yeah.
them more valuable, but you're actually giving your potential buyers and sellers the keys that they need.
Absolutely. I mean, for me, it's all about honesty and trust. And for me, I want to give people the advice that I feel like I never got when
Right.
I went through the process.
Right.
So I'll always be very blunt and honest with people. Listen, you know what? That's not a good condo building. That's not a good house. Look at these cracks here. Look at that crack there.
Sure.
I'm always very honest with people because at the end of the day, I want them to have a good buying process.
Right.
And I want them to make a good decision. And 5 years down the road, I want them to feel like, you know what? That Davelle, she gave us some really good advice.
Let's call her again.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, you really do want to have a client for life, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah, not just one transaction.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Now, we were talking during the break a little bit. I was noticing that there's a big trend, it seems, that people think when they're buying a home that they don't need a realtor.
Yeah.
They only need a realtor when they're selling their home. How would you answer that?
Well, you know, I think that's really scary to me that buyers think that they don't need an agent who's looking after them, their needs on their side. Because having an agent for you working for the buyer, that means you're going to make sure that they get a home inspection. You're going to tell them all the things that the listing agent might not tell them.
Sure.
You know, the listing agent is really representing the best interests of the seller.
Right.
The buyer needs to have an agent who's representing their best interest, who's
Right.
willing to tell them the things that the listing agent might not tell them about the house.
Right.
You know, if there's something bad that had gone on in the house, they might not be willing to share that information, whereas the buying agent is going to be finding more information about that house to make sure that it's in the best interest for that buyer to buy it. I think that buyers think that, oh, wow, I can save a little bit of money going directly to the listing agent. Maybe you might and maybe you won't save money, but I think you're also putting yourself at risk.
Sure.
Because there isn't someone who's basically looking after you and your interests.
And I would imagine too, I mean, when trying to find the right home, and I mean, it's generally people's biggest financial investment of their lives.
Absolutely.
You would want someone that would actually be telling you, this area has better schools, this area
Exactly.
has, lower taxes, whatever it might be.
Exactly. I was just talking to actually a financial planner, and she was telling me about some of her clients who just purchased a house, and she's saying, oh, I wish they would have used you. Actually, they were trying to buy a condo for their child, and she said, oh, they bought in this particular section of town, and I said, oh, that's too bad. I would never recommend that they spend their money in that particular area. And this financial planner agreed with me too. She said, yeah, it's too bad they bought there. I'm like, oh, well, I guess they'll find out later when they try to sell it that wasn't such a good investment.
That resale value is so key, isn't it?
Exactly, and that's one of the things I try to educate my clients about is you always, although you're looking for a place for yourself to move in, you always have to have an eye to resale. Are you going to be able to sell this place when you want to? What are the average days on market in this particular neighborhood versus another neighborhood? All those things are really important for people to know.
No, that's fantastic advice. Now, let me ask you, I know you probably had hundreds and hundreds of successful client stories and sales and purchases. If you had to kind of encapsulate who you are, who Davelle Morrison is as a real estate agent in that sales world, Is there a client story you could share with us that would define that?
Sure, absolutely. I had this great couple that I was working with. I was referred to them. They were living in a condo building. They were renting in a condo building downtown. And they decided, they've got to find a condo for them to buy. And they decided, you know what, we only want to look at condos in the building that we're currently renting. So we went to see a couple of those condos. And I said, well, the view's not so great. This thing isn't that great, but that's what you get in this particular building. And I really wanted to encourage them to just look at other buildings, just to broaden their horizons,
Sure.
to make sure they were making a good decision. So then we went out, we saw a couple more buildings, and they went, oh yeah, we actually do like things that are outside of this one condo building that we thought was the place we wanted to buy in. So then one day I said to them, you know what, there's actually a house on the market that is in the same price range that you're looking at spending. It's close to the subway. Why don't we just go and take a look at the house?
Right.
So they went and they took a look at the house and they loved it. They absolutely loved the house. We put in an offer on it. Unfortunately, we didn't get it because the market's so competitive.
Sure.
But it took a couple more weeks. We found another house, and now they're in a great house and they're in a great place, and they're also in a place where they could start a family.
Yeah.
Whereas if they had bought the condo, well, they were probably going to have to sell it in a couple of years anyway. Now they're in a place where they can actually live a little bit longer.
They can grow.
Yeah, and they can grow.
Yeah.
So I was so happy with that decision that they made. And they said to me, it's so amazing to think that we were looking at buying a condo in this one building.
Yeah.
And now we have a house.
You broaden their horizons.
Yeah, so I think that that's really important. And if I could share another story with you.
Please do.
I've got another client, a real estate investor client, and I started talking to him about investing in real estate. And one of the reasons why I work with people who are real estate investors is because I invest in real estate myself.
Right.
So I believe it. I see how that's really helped my net worth. And that's one of the reasons why I talk to people about becoming real estate investors, because I'd like to show them that they can do what I'm doing.
Right.
So I was talking to this one person about investing in real estate, and he's like, yeah, I might be interested. So I started sending him some real estate investing magazines. And then the following year later, he called me up. He said, I'm ready to buy. So we went out. We found a great property for him. He loves his property. Well, then another year goes by, and he said, I want to buy another one.
Awesome.
And so now we're out looking for another real estate investing property for him. So I love that. I love seeing the progression with clients,
Yeah.
how they can start over here and end up over here and be so much better off for it.
And sharing your vision, really, with their clients and kind of encouraging them to get out there and do it.
Yeah, absolutely.
I love it. How can people find you, Davelle? How can our viewers find you?
They just go to morrisonsellsrealestate.com.
MorrisonSellsRealEstate.com.
Yeah, that's it.
Excellent. Well,
Absolutely.
thank you for joining me on Success today. I wish you the best.
Great, thank you.
Very much continued success to you.
Great, thanks a lot.